Hey everyone. So with Invictus winding down, I've had some time to look at some of the other additions that were implemented with 3.13.1. One of these that really caught my eye was the changes made to trade, since trade has been in a terrible state for so long. So today we're going to be taking a look at these changes and whether or not it's worth your time to haul cargo yet. But before we start, if you enjoyed this video or if it helps you out, please consider leaving a like and or subscribing. And if you really want to help me out, you can become a member with the join button. I really appreciate it. So if you want a quick answer to whether or not trade is worth doing again yet, I'd say that in a larger ship like the Caterpillar, one of the new Starlifters, or the Carrack, you can make some decent credits on a few of these new routes. But even with how long bounties have been taking to spawn in recently, I'd still say that in terms of raw earning potential, they're still the best. And also, bounty missions have the benefit that they can be a lot less frustrating because you won't be losing credits even if something goes wrong. So yeah, if when you're deciding whether or not you want to do some cargo runs and all you care about are credits, I'd still stick to bounty hunting missions at the moment since those are still the most profitable. However, cargo running can definitely be pretty satisfying, so I understand preferring to do that even with its slightly lower payout potential. And thankfully, a couple of these new commodities are actually decent and give you the opportunity to do some somewhat profitable runs and even fill up large ships like the C2, which definitely would not have been possible before some of these changes. So yeah, it's not yet back to being the most profitable gameplay loop, at least from my experience, but it's not quite as terrible as it was before. Now, before I get into all the details with each of these new cargo types, I just want to go over a few things. So first of all, I usually would have switched things up throughout the video and done runs in a few of the larger cargo ships, but I wanted to stick with the C2 for all of my testing since it has the highest capacity and it'll give me the best sense of availability, because if you can fill up its nearly 700 SCU of space, you can be pretty sure that you'll be able to reliably fill up smaller ships, and even if people do get back into trading more now that Invictus is over, you should still be able to fill up those larger ships as well. Also, speaking of the C2, if any of you are new owners of the ship, then I would highly recommend swapping out its quantum drive. The stock one is absolutely terrible, and with some of these new trade routes requiring somewhat large jumps, I'd say the investment is definitely worth it. And with the C2's massive fuel tanks, you can use something like the TS2, which you can find at Port Olazar or New Babbage, and it's an incredibly fast drive at nearly 4 times faster than the stock comma. And besides that one component, the C2 is a great ship to trade with. It's really fast in space when you're trading station to station, but even if you need to land planet side for a run, you don't really get slowed down all that much. So yeah, with the short distances and only moderate availability of cargo in the current verse, the C2 really is the perfect ship for trading. Next, I want to just mention a site that'll probably be useful for you if you're looking at doing some trading yourself. So this is Gallog, and I know there are a couple of alternative sites, but I like using this one. So this site is really useful when you're trying to figure out new options for runs, and it can save you a lot of time in figuring out where to buy and sell the many different commodities that are available now. So here on the commodities page, you can see all of the different types of cargo in the game, and if you click on one, you can see the various locations that will sell it to you and will buy it off of you, and you can also get a general sense of the prices at each of the locations. Now, these prices aren't always exact since prices do change a bit at the moment from supply and demand changes, but they give you a good estimate of what you'll be making from a run. And if you want to know how much a full load is going to cost you, you can either use their calculator under the trading tab or just calculate it yourself. All you have to do is multiply the cost that's listed here by 100 and then by the amount of SCU that your ship has if you want the cost for a full load. And just to give you a general sense of prices, commodities between 1 and 5 credits are on the cheaper side, between 5 and 10 credits are moderately expensive commodities, and then anything above that is going to be very expensive. Now, the other important piece of information that this site gives you is buying and selling rates at each location that has the commodity that you're looking at. It's hard to know exactly what these numbers mean in terms of the availability that you can expect, especially since refresh per minute isn't just for one server, and the stock is going to be affected by all players on all servers. But in my experience, if the refresh is around 100,000, which you can see is the case at places like major landing zones, you'll have no issues filling up even a C2. With 10,000, it seems like you can get somewhere around 50 SCU at a time, so it can take a little while to fill up big ships if you want to fill it up all the way, but medium and small ships should have no issues. And the refresh rates under 10,000 means you're probably going to be waiting around at that terminal for a long time if you want any appreciable amount of cargo. So yeah, if you see a run that looks good in terms of price and distance from stop to stop, make sure you check on that refresh rate or you might be somewhat disappointed. Now, getting into the details of this most recent update, I want to start off by going over the new cargo types. So 4 new tradable commodities have been added, and they're all consumer goods. I'm going to go through all of them in this video, but the main thing to know about them is that while they're not all necessarily great in terms of profit and risk at the moment, I still think it's a great thing to see them added since they're expanding trade gameplay to even more parts of Stanton. So before this update, pretty much any sort of profitable run was from an outpost to a station or an outpost to a landing zone, and these new commodity types expand on what's viable to be traded from landing zone to stations or even from station to station. So yeah, these types of runs are different in nature, and it's more than just a change of scenery. With landing zone to station runs, it gives an advantage to ships with good atmospheric performance because that's going to speed up your landings and takeoff, and with station to station trading, raw capacity is the most important thing, and flight performance is kind of secondary. And this is going to be the strength of hopefully soon upcoming ships like the Hull C. And some of these are pretty expensive commodities, so while currently the margins aren't there, this could mean that there's finally going to be a commodity in the future for smaller haulers to make decent profits with. And whether that's through rebalancing of these current commodities or just them adding additional ones in the future, seeing some commodities available at these prices is a good thing, I think. So yeah, while adding 4 new commodity types could have been a very small change since at the moment they're all just boxes that show up in your ship, or sometimes even invisible, because the spots where you can buy and sell them are in a variety of new locations, it's actually opened up some gameplay options, and is a bigger change than you might think at first. Now moving on to talking about the actual commodities, I'm going to start with audiovisual equipment. So this was the one that was initially the most exciting to me, and it's available to buy at the admin office in New Babbage. And yeah, with all of these, if you're getting them at landing zones, so like New Babbage and Lorville, you want to go to the admin office, not the main trade area. This will probably change in the future, but at the moment in New Babbage, you're going to want to go to this little area off of the commons here, and in Lorville, you want to go to the admin office near the Habs, which is in Metro Center, not the Central Business District. But yeah, at the moment, these are not available at the main trading kiosks and landing zones. So when I first saw the audiovisual equipment and its price, I initially thought we were finally going to be getting a commodity that would make trading in small ships viable. This stuff is super expensive, like 10 times more expensive than the previous most expensive legal cargoes of Laranite and Agricium, and I was hoping they'd have it set up so that the availability was low, but they'd have the margins be high enough that you could make decent money with a small cargo capacity. And in terms of making sense in the verse, I think that would have been pretty reasonable, because I don't think you'd often need a whole ship full of AV equipment, but taking small loads of it off of planet to the orbital station above could make sense. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case at all. So yeah, in my experience, you could buy as much of this stuff as you had the money for, and it's gonna cost you a ton. I was a bit confused as to why there would be so much of this seemingly specialized commodity available, but I guess audiovisual equipment is probably referring to the products that Microtech produces, which is the name of both the planet and the corporation that owns it. So this route from New Babbage to Port Tressler is actually just bringing their exports off of planet to be shipped off to other places. So that does make a bit more sense as to why there is so much available. It's just not what I was expecting. But going back to the cost and profits, this stuff is just absurdly expensive. I thought I had plenty of credits starting this video with a bit over 10 million, but to fill up a C2 you'd need around 17 million. And with that full C2, you'd make around 260,000 credits a run in profit. Now for a run that you could probably do about 3 to 4 times an hour, that's a ton of money, but when you think about how much you're risking to get that, in my opinion, it's just not worth it. Even with that sizable profit, you'd have to do over 50 runs successfully to make what you're investing on each run in profit. So that means even if 1 in 50 runs goes wrong, you're not making money. While I eventually think this could make sense for this type of run, since this is a pretty simple run that should have little to no risk, with the state of the game at the moment, I'm not willing to gamble that I'm not going to run into any issues in that many runs. All it takes is a hangar door desyncing and closing on you, or someone deciding they want to ram people around Port Tressler, or even something like this new stutter that seems to happen after exiting quantum travel where you lose control of your ship for a few seconds, for all of those credits to go away. So yeah, while the profit is there in terms of how much money you can make in a certain amount of time, I personally don't have the nerves for this run, and I would not recommend it just because the amount of credits you're risking is so high. Let me know what you guys think about this though. Also, I just want to mention that I didn't bring up 30Ks in the what could go wrong in that last section for a reason, because at least theoretically, pretty much all of these runs I'm going to be talking about today should be 30K resistant. In the event of a 30K, your ship is supposed to be stored where it last took off from, so for most normal runs, this is an issue because when you buy stuff at an outpost, that means your ship is going to be stored there, and since it is an outpost, there's no way to retrieve it, since you can only retrieve small vehicles. But all of these new runs are pretty much going to be from station to station or landing zone to station, meaning you should be fine even if you get a 30K while you're in transit. I personally have done a lot of the scrap runs in the past, which are from station to station, and when I got 30K'd a couple of times, I was able to get my ship back out at the station that I bought the scrap from and continue on my way like nothing happened. But again, this is Star Citizen, so there is a chance that something could go wrong, but it is substantially less than a normal run. Alright, moving on to souvenirs. These are still not cheap compared to most commodities, but have a much more palatable price tag. Also, these are available to buy at both Lorville and ArcCorp, so you have a few more options compared to the AV equipment. So onto the credit amounts for this stuff, you have to pay a bit under 700,000 credits to fill up a C2, but then taking that load to Everest Harbor will get you around 90,000 of profit. So this is actually a decent run, especially if you're just going back and forth between Lorville and Everest Harbor, and while it is a bit annoying to have to deal with the trains, you actually only have to deal with them one way on this run, because since you buy at the admin office, you can just backspace once you land to immediately wake up in the habs right next to where you need to be. Also, this run is nice because if you happen to be at either Area 18 or Lowerville to do something like pick up some weapons or other equipment, you can just take a little bit of extra time to do this cargo run and get a pretty easy bonus of credits. So yeah, if you don't mind train rides and have about 1 million credits to invest, you can get some decent profit selling some souvenirs. Before we move on to the next thing though, I also want to mention that it seems like they're having an issue with these new commodities actually showing up in your cargo hold. I say it's just these new ones because I did trade some things that were previously available, like scrap, and that actually appeared in my ship, but none of these new items ever did. This was a bit concerning, especially when I had 3 million credits worth of invisible cargo on my ship, and I just had to trust that it was actually there. But yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned if your ships look empty if you're trading any of this new stuff. On to construction materials, I'm going to go over these quickly because they're a similar story to the AV equipment that I talked about first. It is a bit cheaper, and you have similar margins to the AV equipment, so I'd say it's slightly better, but again, it's still just such a massive investment for comparably small profits. It would cost you a bit under 9 million to fill up a C2, and you get a bit under 200,000 credits in profit for bringing it from Lorville to Port Tressler. So yeah, a bit better in terms of profit for your investment, but you have a much longer trip to take since you have to sell all the way over by Microtech, so it's hard to say whether this stuff is actually better than AV equipment, but personally I'm going to avoid both of them. I just do not feel like losing 8 million credits, no matter how unlikely that is. Now the final new commodity are fireworks, and in my opinion I think I've saved the best for last here. So these are available to buy at a variety of the smaller rest stops, so HER L1, HER L2, CRU L1, and ARC L1, as well as the admin office in Lorville, and you can sell them in a couple of spots too. Both Port Tressler and Everest Harbor will take them, and I believe the admin office in New Babbage will as well. In terms of price and returns on your runs, these are a bit more expensive than souvenirs, so about 850,000 to fill up a C2, and you get around 80,000 credits per run you make. But what makes these better to trade than souvenirs though, is that since you're trading from station to station, you don't have to deal with any long flights in and out of atmosphere or any train rides, so you can make these runs pretty quickly. Especially if you do a run from HER L1 or HER L2 to Everest, that's a very quick trip, and until the prices get bad from a lot of people doing that run, or at least I anticipate they will, it should be pretty profitable. So yeah, I guess this is kind of like an upgraded version of scrap hauling, and with all of the options available for pickup and drop off points, with a fast quantum drive you can fly all around Stanton and make pretty reasonable money doing it. So yeah, I think this is going to be my go-to from now on. Being station to station makes it pretty low stress compared to other forms of trading, and while the investment is kind of high, it's not impossible to make it back either, since that should only take around 10 runs. So yeah, I think this will tide me over until we get cargo hauling missions, and it's a nice addition. I did just want to briefly mention scrap hauling though, because if you are only interested in trading in the verse and you don't really want to do any missions to build up an initial bank, scrap hauling used to be a pretty good way to do that. But unfortunately it's not as good as it used to be. First of all, availability isn't great. I went to CRU L1 here, the closest rest stop to Port Olazar, and the prices weren't great, and it took me a couple of refresh cycles to actually fill up the C2. You can fix this issue by just traveling a bit further to somewhere like HER L3, which isn't that far out of the way, but this is just a sign that it's in a bad spot because this never used to be an issue. But the real issue I have with scrap runs is selling. So to sell, you have to go to Port Olazar because there's nowhere else that really buys any appreciable amount of scrap for any decent price. The issue with that though is Port Olazar is quite a pain to deal with now, and has only gotten worse with the armistice zones being removed. So yeah, even with the impound trick, where you can hover above a pad to get impounded and teleported into the station so that no one can mess with your ship while you're not in it, it's still not that uncommon to get people messing with you, like this Hornet did here. The C2 can take a lot, but I'd rather not have to deal with this process. So yeah, scrap running is still kind of an option when you're starting out trading, and you can make decent credits with a buy price of a bit under 100,000 for a profit of around 30,000, which is pretty good when you're starting out, but it's no longer an easy risk-free run like it used to be, with all of the shenanigans that go on at Olazar these days. Alright, and then for this last part, I want to talk a bit about price alerts. So this is a new addition with 3.13.1 where you get a journal entry that updates every so often with listings for special buy and sell prices of different commodities and different locations. Now, just as a disclaimer, I didn't get too much of a chance to play around with trying out different ways to take advantage of these, so if you have any great advice, I'd love to hear that in the comments. But yeah, in my experience, these price alerts are hard to get much benefit from at the moment. First of all, on a server that's performing reasonably well, these seem to change every 10 minutes or so, which is not a lot of time to get somewhere and take advantage of the special price. And secondly, the prices don't seem to really be worth the hassle, because the prices seem to change by less than 1/10 of a credit. Now this can make a slight difference, so if you see an alert for an overstock sell that's not too far out of your way, it might be worth trying to get there in time, but you're also not going to be missing out on all that much if you ignore them. And this is a bit disappointing to me, because I was hoping that these would be much more drastic changes in price, and ones that would stick around for like an hour or so, because that could cause a lot of fun things to happen, like a ton of people rushing to one area to try to take advantage of it, and then potentially you could have pirates in the area as well, since the price changes are public, and that could lead to a lot of fun gameplay. But at least from what I've seen, these are pretty small changes and are hard to take advantage of, so I hope they adjust this in the future. Again though, let me know if I'm missing something here, because I spent most of my time checking out the new commodities. Anyway, so that's all I have for this video. Well, cargo isn't entirely fixed, and there's still a ton of commodities that aren't available in any quantity worth trading. Some of these new ones are decent options, and again, I'm glad to see them doing something besides outpost to landing zone trading. What do you guys think though? Have you been trading much this patch, and if so, how's it been going? Okay, now I want to thank my members, The Pear Effect, Starlit Domina, and GreatWatch93. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel, and if you guys want to support me, you can do that by leaving a like and or subscribing, or if you really want to help me out, you can become a member as well. I really appreciate it. So good luck on your trade runs, and thanks for watching.